What's up guys, Skip the Africanus here, and in today's video we're going to be going over what the FTAC Recon in Modern Warfare 2 is, or more specifically what the 458 Socom is. Because I'm sure quite a few of you have done that little weapon inspection and saw that big round and were like, what exactly is this? So, cool thing with this video too is I actually own a 458 Socom, so later on in the video we can take a look at an actual 458 Socom and the internals and all that good stuff. So to start off though, with the 458 Socom, why does it exist? Because that really is a good question if you've never heard of this thing. Why this big monster of a bullet? So its origin story is actually kind of funny in a way. It started off down in Mogadishu, and there were reports coming in that the drugged up Somalis were taking multiple hits of 5.56 and barely even flinching at that point. So the US Army really wanted something with a lot of knockdown power. Now, the 458 Socom was not the only cartridge that was in the race for this. There were plenty of others. They considered the 7.62x39, 9x39, what was called 45 Professional, but is known as 450 Bushmaster now, and 50 Action Express, some other stuff too. The 458 won out for a variety of reasons, depending on which cartridge you compare it to. Either they just liked the stopping power a bit more, or, you know, it had better bullet selection, and then there was also some weird stuff with some of these other cartridges and just the ability to procure parts for guns being built for them. So the 458, of course, was the best option for this. And aside from just a bigger bullet, one of the big requirements was that it use as many parts from the M4 carbines as possible. They didn't want to have to build a whole new gun around this. Which the 458 Socom does quite well, because the only thing you actually need to change in the rifle is you need to enlarge the ejection port, and then you also need a bigger bolt head. But aside from that, everything else in the rifle practically stays the same. So I think this is a good opportunity to look at an actual 458 Socom, and we'll compare it with an original AR and just to see the slight differences in between the two. Alright, so we got our two ARs here. Now, obviously, there's more than a few differences between these two, but there's two main important ones that we're going to take a look at, because that would translate to all the other 458 versus 5.56 platforms. And by the way, if you're wondering why that tape is there, that's to cover up the engraving I had to get, because this is an actual, like, you know, registered SBR, a 10-inch SBR. But anyways, let's go into those differences. So, obviously, you can notice the ejection port, like I had mentioned. On the original one, it's a lot thinner, and they had to actually hollow it out a lot more. Fun fact, actually, I completely forgot about that when I started this build. So, I tried using the original one, and yeah, the obvious thing happens where the casing won't eject. So, hollow out the large ejection port. And then next off, you needed your larger bolt head, which we've got here. So your top is your 5.56, a lot smaller, and then the bottom is your 458, widened out for that bigger rim. Now, again, the gun uses practically all the same parts. You'll notice the actual bolt carrier and all that is the exact same, which of course, same with the magazines. One of the important things that you really want interchangeable in a project like this. So on the right, we have a 30 rounder with 5.56 in it. As you can see, it goes to a double stack, double feed type of stuff like that. And then we got the 458, again in a magazine originally for 5.56, but it only holds 10 rounds, which feeds from a single feed and goes single stack. Now, one thing that I would like to point out with the magazines is they would have actually been using the standard steel mags, aside from, well, that really was all that was available at the time. There's a weird thing with 458. Now, these ones I reloaded, and I was able to get a bullet that kind of fit into these, but any longer, which the stuff they were using was, you get all these tabs in the front on a lot of these polymer mags. So usually you go with steel mags for them. And then I'm not sure if I mentioned this. I know I mentioned that a 30 rounder feeds 10, but then it translates to the like 40 rounder feeding 15, which we see in game, and then these 20 rounder will feed 7. So that really is the only differences with the 458 Socom versus the 5.56 ARs. Literally just a bolt head and enlarge the receiver. Now, before we go off camera, I thought it'd be appropriate to show an actual size comparison between your 458 and your 5.56, because it is just absolutely massive. Now, this one's actually a 55 grain bullet, whereas this in here's a 62. There really ain't that much difference in length. But yeah, so these ones I have right here are 350 grains. They go all the way up to 600. These are definitely some heavy, slow-moving bullets. Great for suppressors, which was one of the big requirements that they had going on for those trials for a new cartridge. Now, obviously, a round like this will generate a lot of recoil, well, give or take. Personally, I think the best way to compare it to is an old 4570 trapdoor, the old black powder loads, which I don't know if a lot of you guys know how that feels, but I personally do because I shoot them a lot. But the funny thing with that, with all this is, mine obviously is a semi-automatic. The militaries would have been either, you know, 3-round or full auto, of course, with the selector going to semi-auto, which they would likely keep it in semi-auto, but it is still funny to think that they very likely had access to running these on full auto, much like in-game. Now, one part of this video that I really wanted to get into was the actual, like, service history, you know, like, did they use it, how did it run? For the most part, it appears they used it, but I was struggling to find any actual info on, well, how it was, or really any engagements in general with it. So if you happen to know how this thing actually worked, you know, like in the field, I'd love to read that down in the comments, because I really felt like I put some time into looking this up. Actually, I know I put time into looking it up when I was doing that build too, and again, I didn't really find anything. But anyways, I think that's going to do it for today's brief little video on what the 458 Socom is. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a good day. And if you got any other info in regards to the 458 that you think is neat or cool, you know, that I didn't mention in the video, feel free to leave it down in the comments below.